In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I transformed my entire kitchen with FlexFire LEDs and how everything can be controlled with an app on my phone.
Hey guys, welcome to Life of Bliss. My name is Kyle, and today I've got a super cool project for you guys, something that I'm super excited about. As you can see behind me here, I have a table full of LED strips and supplies and controllers and power sources. I'm going to be throwing all of these into our kitchen cabinets here, both above cabinets, inside some of the cabinets that have glass, as well as underneath the cabinets to shine down on the countertops. Now, I'm no stranger to doing LED strip lights in various settings. I've done some in my theater room in the past, as well as the bar in our last house. I'll actually link a video down below to that. But today I'm going to be using some different products from a company called FlexFire LED, and probably the coolest thing about this entire install is it is completely solderless. There's going to be no solder, no soldering gun. That install in the last house, I did use solder and soldering gun, and all of those tiny connections and tiny soldering points that you had to make took forever, and it would have been about 3 times as many soldering joints here in the kitchen versus what I did down in our last house. So I was really looking for an option that I didn't have to do all of that soldering work, and I have found it with FlexFire LED. Now, as you can see, there already is some lighting in this kitchen. There's some puck lights underneath the cabinets here. One of the downsides is you have to flip a switch to turn them on and off, right over here. Same thing with the other side, and I really don't want to be flipping a switch or having to go over and turn them on and off every time I want to turn them on or off. I'd like to be able to do that with my phone. The FlexFire Leona Controller allows you to do that. There's an app for your phone that you're able to control and group several different lights together, which I'll be going over. I also would like to have some sort of option to dim or color change, which all of these lights are dimmable. Color change RGB, as well as a temperature change for the color of white. So although this looks good, the LED strips are going to look a lot better and be more convenient. Now, one other space I'm going to be putting these lights in is just off to the side of the kitchen, and that's this area over here. There is some lights that you have to turn on with a power strip up inside the cabinet, which is obviously inconvenient. But we're going to get all that replaced. I've got this glass cabinet over here being currently used as a bar area off the kitchen. We're going to be putting some strip lights all the way up and down either side to light up this entire cabinet instead of just the top shelf with that light up there, as well as throw some lights underneath as well. So this will be a lot nicer looking and a lot more convenient when it's all done. Now, keeping up with the idea of simplicity, you're only going to need a few fairly common household tools. You're going to need some wire cutters and strippers, a Phillips screwdriver, a razor blade, and a tiny screwdriver set. You're going to need the flathead out of those. Probably going to use a hot glue gun. We have some bits and a drill there to be able to drill some of these holes in the cabinets. Now, as far as supplies, we're going to start over here on this side. We have the RGB dynamic tunable white LED strips. Each one of these are a little over 16 foot, so I have about 64 foot of LEDs that are going to be going in. Next, we have some solderless connectors. These are a game changer. These are what make this install so much easier than any other install I've done in the past with LEDs. I'll be going over exactly how to use those, and actually you can see one in use here. We've got this extension wire that has 6 wires running throughout it, and it uses some spikes in there to puncture through the jacketing on the wire, and then you slide your strip in on this side. I'll go over that more in detail here in a bit. Next, we have our power supplies. We're going to need 4 of those for this area, and I'll go over how to connect everything to the wall as well as to our controllers here off to the side. These are the Leona Pro Smart Home Controller. They do the RGB plus tonable white. And then also, just in case we don't have our phone or we want to be able to control these lights remotely here, we do have a remote that they included. Now, before I dive into the install, let's talk about how I got to this point and how I knew I needed all of these products. Now, that's one of the great things about FlexFire LED. When I was talking to them about the project, they said, look, just send us a few pictures of your space, give us some measurements of what you're looking at, and we'll put together a package for whatever you want. And that's what they did. I literally sent them these few pictures that I'll show on the screen, going over where I wanted the lights, what zones I wanted them to be in that are differentiated by the colors, and what sort of measurements we were looking at. And they put together a package that would allow all of the zones that I wanted, all of the power sources to make sure that I wouldn't have dimming throughout the LED strips, and all of the connections to make sure I wouldn't have to touch a soldering gun once. Now, like I said, this is going to be a full install video from start to finish, so let's go ahead and start with the power supplies and figure out how we're going to get this plugged into the wall. Now, this is one of the 4 power supplies from Meanwell that I have. This is a 60-watt power supply. And as you can see, this end has 3 wires that will need to plug into some sort of power source. And then on the other end, you have the black and red wires that should be going into the controllers. So let's first focus on how we're going to get this plugged into the wall. I think this is the only product I didn't get from FlexFire, but these are some Leviton plug-ins that you can grab on Amazon. They're only about $1 a piece, but you can open these up and you have a spot for your load, your neutral, or excuse me, your ground, and then your neutral. These allow you to take any stripped wire, throw it in here, make the connections, close it up, obviously not like that, but we'll be able to then take this and plug it into the wall and have a nice clean power cord at the end of it. Now we want to cut back some of this black jacket, probably about 1 inch, so you can either take your wire cutters and softly start going away at that black jacket, or you can take your razor blade and just, again, softly push down and roll a little bit, just to cut through to where you start seeing the other wires. Now we got plenty of wire to work with here. We want to go ahead and strip these ends about 1/2 inch or so. Take our plug in, loosen all of our screws. And then just set it in there to make sure you're going to have enough line to get where you need. And it looks like I need to strip a little bit more off of this black jacket for our lines to reach up there to those top screws, so I'll go ahead and do that now. What you want is that thick black jacket right here on the end, but still enough line to come up here and reach our connections. First connection I'm going to do is the ground. I'm going to make a little loop here on the wire, and you want to orientate these to when you're tightening them down, it wants to pull the wire with it and tighten it around the screw. So I'll loop it there, and then when I start turning, it's going to grab a hold of that wire and want to pull it in tighter as I tighten it down. So before we start connecting these, let's go over what each one of these wires are. The green and yellow wire is going to be our ground wire. The brown wire is the ACL or L for load. The blue wire is ACN or N for neutral. And I've already connected the ground here, but as you can see, that green and yellow wire is going to our ground screw. We have our brown or pinkish wire. It's going to go over here to the gold screw, which is our load. And then our blue wire is going to go over to our silver screw, which is our neutral. So next we'll take that brown wire, again, give it a little loop. Throw it on the gold screw for our load. You want these really snug to make sure those wires aren't going to be coming out and creating a short. Then our last wire is our neutral. We go underneath the screw here. This is how it should look when you're done. We're going to take that black wire, place it right on the end there, stuff our other wires inside, close it up, take your screw, throw it in the top, and tighten down. There we go. Now we have a nice plug on our Meanwell power supply. Now during the planning phase, you're going to want to make sure you either have some sort of outlet inside of a cabinet for you to be able to plug your power sources into, or up above the cabinets so they can be hidden away up above. So now I'm going to go ahead and lay everything out before I install it. This is a really important part of the installation because you want to make sure that you have everything that you need, all the connectors, all of your lines cut correctly, and that's actually another thing I forgot to mention. You do want a good sharp pair of scissors because these lines are cuttable, and that's what makes them extendable and be able to put in different places. So Make sure you have a good pair of scissors, but I have several different power supplies. This one in particular is a 96 watt power supply. I have a 60 watt, I have a 185 watt. So just be sure that you're putting those power supplies where they need to go to make sure you're getting proper power to your lines. And as always, if you do have any questions about your installation or where certain components should go, you can reach out to FlexFire LED and they should be able to help you out with any questions that you have. Now, one important thing to keep in mind while cutting all of your lines and getting everything set up, each LED strip on both ends has this 6-wire extension on the end. This is about maybe a little over 2 foot long. Try to keep this intact to hook up to the controller because this is going to be a almost guaranteed connection here on the end. They test all these prior to shipping them out, so this is going to be a good secure connection. If you start cutting these at one of the joints and putting in one of your own connections, that is a possibility for a faulty connection. So always try to start your LED runs with this end with the wire on it. Now, I'm not going to be going over every cut or every zone with you guys, but I figured I would use this smaller section here as an example for what I'll be doing. Now, I'm going to be having one zone with a strip underneath the cabinets as well as a strip right up here up top. That's all going to be on one controller, and I'm going to have a separate controller up along the top for another zone with 3 strips going along the top side of the cabinet. So, for example, over here, I'm going to need my 2 controllers, my LED controllers. I'm going to have one power source that will be able to power all of the LEDs sufficiently without any of them dimming, which I will show you how to connect 2 controllers up to one power source here momentarily. And I also have my LED strip that I'll go ahead and make all my cuts on prior to installing anything, just to make sure it's all going to fit up smoothly. Now, normally when connecting one of these controllers, you'll just take your positive and put it in the positive in there, which is red, and your negative, put it in the negative. Screw these down tight, and you'll have power to your controller. Now, when connecting 2 of these, it's really pretty simple. I just took one of these power cords, cut it a little bit shorter, and got a couple of jumper cables out of it. And what we're gonna do is just take one of our cables, twist it together with the main power source cable, put it in one of our controllers, tighten that down nice and tight. Do the same thing with our ground, throw them in the ground side, tighten that down. And then now our cables coming out, that is our jumper to the other controller. And now you have 2 controllers hooked up to one power source. Just make sure the power source that you're using is going to be powerful enough to handle both of the strips that you're going to be hooking up. Now, while we're here, let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to hook up the RGB and tunable white LED strips here. Now, we have 6 different wires, and I suggest they come a little bit shorter than this. Like, here's an example. The wires are cut off pretty darn short. I went ahead and stripped the wires back just a little bit more to give it a better connection here in the box. And we'll start with our black wire. That goes in the plus section over here. So we'll get that wire put inside and tighten it down. Next is pretty easy. The red wire goes with R, green goes with G, and blue goes with B. And then next we have the cool white and warm white. Your brown is going to go into the warm white area there, and the white is going to go into the cool white. There you go. Now your LED strip is hooked up. I would suggest going ahead and just testing everything to make sure that it's functioning properly before you install everything. I've already done that, but definitely it's something good to do before you throw it up in your cabinets. Now, to cut these, you'll just find the length that you want the strip to be. Take your scissors, go right down the center of that copper joint, and now you've made a specific length that you need for your cabinet, and you have the rest of the strip to go off of as well.
Now comes the fun part, which is installing everything. Now, the first thing you'll want to do is lay out all of your strips where they should be going to make sure you have the right lengths cut. Then you'll take a 1/4-inch drill bit and drill some holes for that extension wire to connect all of the LED strips. For that extension wire, you'll just cut away that outer sheathing and then separate the wires to go into your connectors. Picking on the end of the LED strip that was cut, that you'll have to orientate the wires correctly, similar to how they were hooked up to the controller box. The main thing is you'll want to be consistent with what the LED strip is and make sure it is oriented the correct way. Wires are crimped down. Go ahead and take your LED strip, throw it into the connector and press it down. Be sure to pull back a little bit of the cover for the tape on the backside so it's easier to remove once you're ready to stick it to the cabinet.
So everything is just loosely ran. I've got our controller over here with some extension wire running to the first strip that will be up along this part of the trim. This runs down into the cabinet right there and pops out again right over here. We've got this extension wire hooked up to this strip, which will be running up here. And then we got another connector and extension wire running through the cabinet again. There's already a hole back there, which is why I just routed it to the back. But that will come up here, and this strip will be running up along the top of this cabinet.
Moving to the underside of the cabinet, I ran an extension wire on the inside of the cabinets and down through a hole in the bottom side, and then attached the LED strip with the double-sided tape along the back. And like I mentioned, after making any new connection, I did test everything for function and made sure all of the colors were working correctly. I'll just show you everything along the top side of this first cabinet that I did. As you can see, all the extension wires and LED strips are now secure. All the slack is taken up. As you can see, I put the LED strips along that trim there to angle them back towards the wall, and they'll still shine up towards the ceiling as well. And I did secure some of that extension wire down with some plastic staples. You can see on the inside of the cabinet there, not much of that wire is showing, so you really shouldn't notice that once you get your dishes in there, and no one's going to see it anyways with the doors closed. Moving on to the part of the kitchen over above the refrigerator, the cabinets were a lot deeper over there, so I just ran that strip straight down the middle and used the double-sided tape along the back to secure it to the top.
So moving on to the last zone over here, which I'm calling the bar zone, I'm going to be running some lights underneath the cabinets here, as well as along each side of this glass cabinet and along the top. And I'm trying to make this easy on myself. I've got 3 strips here that I'm going to be throwing inside the cabinet that were the very end of the strip that has the extension wire on here. As you can see, this is about 2.5 foot long or so, so I'm going to have plenty of extension wire to run these up along the side of the cabinets and get to the controller up there. I'm going to have to use some extension wire to connect the strip underneath the cabinet and run it up through this cabinet right here, up to the top where the controller and power source are going to be. And in the spirit of keeping this a completely solderless setup, I am going to be doing something a little different up top. So what I'm going to be doing up top is bunching each one of these 6 colors together and throwing them inside of one of these solderless crimp connectors. So 4 of the green wires are going to be coming in one side, and then I will have more extension wire, and only 1 of the green wires will be coming out the other. Crimp those all together, and that way I'm only going to have 1 wire for each one of the colors coming into this controller. It's going to be a lot easier to set up, and the best part is it's completely solderless.
So no solder is the name of the game here today. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and drill out some holes to run that extension wire through the cabinet, and you'll get a little better look here of how I ran that through the cabinet as well over on the other side of the kitchen. That wire will just tuck in front of those shelves and push right up against the front side there. Never be seen as long as you pull it pretty tight. And we'll move on to making that connection down underneath for that LED strip to go underneath the cabinet. And once again, test everything to make sure those connections work. And then it's just as simple as pulling off the back side of that tape and sticking it to the underside of the cabinet. Now, before getting to the rest of the cabinet, I did want to remove all the glassware just to make sure I didn't get any sawdust and wood chips on it, and to make sure nothing broke. So first, like I said, I'm going to run all of those strips through the top side of the cabinet and get all of those wires up top to connect to the controller. Here you can see I am just stripping each one of those wires down, giving me plenty of room to twist them together and then throw them in one of these solderless connectors. Now I go ahead and throw another piece from the extension wire that will go into the controller into that connector, throw a few crimps on it, and it is good as gold. And we're just going to rinse and repeat for each of the colors, and as you can see, this is going to be a lot cleaner and easier connecting 1 wire to each color on the controller instead of 4 wires. Now, I went ahead and made my connections up top at the controller before I continued putting the strips in the rest of the cabinets. Here you can get a good look at how those LED strips went on the front side of the cabinets. There was enough space between the shelves and the front that I was just able to slip those right in front and use that double-sided tape to connect it. And with that, it was all done. So adding the LED controllers to the Leona app is pretty simple. Once you've downloaded the app, you can go into the Add Device up in the corner, and it will automatically start searching for devices that are not connected. As you can see, it has found the one device there to add, so we'll go ahead and click Add. It will ask us to put in the password for our Wi-Fi, which I will not show you. And once that's entered, it will start updating that app with the settings and add that zone to your controller on your phone. Now, once that's added, you can rename and control that zone separately, or add that zone as well as several other zones to a group and control all of those at once. For instance, I have my entire kitchen in one group. That way I can control all the lights either separately through each zone or all together through one group. And as you can see here, the app is extremely easy to use with the color wheel to choose your color. You have a brightness scale to choose how bright you'd like it, and also a hue scale if you'd like to tone down the colors a bit. And since I took a ton of nice pictures and video of this kitchen setup after I got done, I'm going to tell you a few things I like about this while showing you some of these pictures. Now, first off, these LED strips that I got from FlexFire are very, very accurate as far as color accuracy, from 100% brightness down to its lowest 1% brightness setting. And what I mean by that is, with the cheaper Amazon lights that I got in my previous setup, the red started turning a little pink as they got dimmer, the orange started looking yellow, the green started looking bluish the more dim that you got. So these are very color accurate through the entire brightness scale, which is a huge plus if you're not wanting to run these at full brightness all the time. Now, another thing that I really like about this setup is the app. It's extremely easy to use. You're able to not only control each zone, but put zones into groups like I mentioned earlier, and it makes things much more streamlined when you know, turning the entire kitchen on and off. Another nice thing is if you have internet access on your phone, no matter where you are, you can turn these lights on and off or adjust them. I can be next door or I can be in the next state, and as long as I have internet access, I can control these lights. Now, the last thing I really enjoyed about this install versus my last place was the quick connectors that I used. Those saved a ton of time, and not soldering 6 leads to each one of those LED strips was just a huge time saver, and it saved a lot of tedious work. I highly suggest getting those quick connectors if you decide to do something like this. You will not regret it.
So there you go, guys, the complete install process that I did to install LED lights underneath, above, and inside your cabinets. So if you guys are doing an LED project like this in your home, be sure to give FlexFire a look. I'll be linking all of their products that I used down in the description below. Thank you to FlexFire for sponsoring this video, and I hope you guys learned something along the way. I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you soon.